My girlfriend gave all our savings to her ex-boyfriend to pay his debt. Her ex mocked me, but I gave them both a surprise. Before we go on, hit subscribe and drop a comment telling us which city you're tuning in from. My name's Duncan. I'm 28 years old, and until recently, I thought I was building a stable life with my girlfriend Mariana. We've been in a relationship for 2 years and have been living together for a year in a small but comfortable apartment. It wasn't anything luxurious, but it was our space. We had clear routines, similar schedules, and, at least from my perspective, a calm relationship without major conflicts. From the start, we both talked about the future quite seriously, not impulsively, but like two adults trying to do things right. After a year of relationship, we decided to open a joint bank account. The idea was simple. Every month, we deposit a fixed amount to save with two clear long-term goals: pay for a modest wedding and eventually use that money as part of the down payment for our own house. From the beginning, it was clear that our contributions wouldn't be equal. I earned more than her, a lot more. In fact, Mariana worked part-time and had a stable but limited income. It never bothered me to contribute more. It was a conscious decision. I agreed to cover a larger part of the monthly savings because at that time it seemed fair and logical to me. To be precise, I contributed around 70% of the money that went into that account every month. There were months when I even deposited more than agreed. Mariana contributed less, but she always did her part. I never complained to her about that. During that year, I adjusted many things in my life. I stopped buying unnecessary clothes, canceled subscriptions, reduced outings with friends, postponed trips, and even sold some things I didn't use to add more money to the savings. I didn't live it as a dramatic sacrifice, but as an investment in something I believed was solid. I thought it was worth it. Mariana, for her part, always seemed grateful. She talked enthusiastically about the wedding, how she'd like the house to be, about the 5 or 10-year plans. I never noticed contradictions between what she said and what she did. She didn't hide her phone, her schedules didn't change, there were no suspicious attitudes. Our living together was stable, even predictable. We didn't argue about money. In fact, that issue seemed completely resolved between us. For a reason that now seems ironic to me, I was always very careful with bank security. I was afraid that one day my main phone would be stolen and someone could access my financial apps. That's why I kept an old cell phone without an active line that I always left at home. On that device, I had the bank apps and linked accounts installed. I only used it when I needed to make transfers or check important transactions. That cell phone was kept in a desk drawer in the apartment. Mariana knew about its existence, but I never gave it importance. It didn't have a complex password because I never imagined someone close could use it without my consent. Any given day, without any prior warning sign, I decided to check the joint account. Not because I suspected something, but because I wanted to see how much we'd accumulated. We planned to talk to a financial advisor in a few months and start looking at real options for the house. It was more curiosity than anything else. I opened the bank app and logged into the account. The first thing I thought was that the app hadn't loaded right. I refreshed the screen, logged out, and logged back in. The balance was still the same, zero. Not a few dollars less, not a partial withdrawal. Absolute zero. My first reaction was to think of a technical error. I didn't feel immediate panic, but confusion. I checked the transaction history. There was a recent transfer for the total available balance. It didn't appear as a strange charge or a cash withdrawal. It was a transfer made from the same account with the right details. I called the bank right away. After going through the usual verification process, I explained to the operator that the balance of my joint account had disappeared and that I didn't recognize the transaction. She checked the system and told me with total calmness that there wasn't any fraud report. The transfer had been made correctly from an authorized device. She even mentioned it came from the same cell phone from which transactions were normally made. I asked her for more details. She confirmed the date, the time, and the exact amount. Everything matched the day before, at a time when I was working away from home. I insisted that I hadn't made that transfer. She checked again and repeated that, according to the system, there wasn't any irregularity. The access was legit, without failed attempts, without security alerts. I hung up the call with a feeling hard to describe. It wasn't just fear, it was a mix of disbelief and bewilderment. I started to mentally review who could have had access to that cell phone. The answer was obvious and at the same time uncomfortable. Mariana, when I got home that night. I tried to behave normally. I didn't want to accuse her without understanding what had happened. We had dinner together, talked about everyday things, and during all that time she behaved just like always, calm, affectionate, with no apparent nerves. After dinner, I asked her to talk for a moment. I told her I'd checked the savings account and the money wasn't there. I didn't raise my voice or show anger. I just asked if she knew anything about it. At first, she looked at me in silence. She didn't seem surprised, but not prepared either. She looked down and took a few seconds to answer. That silence was what worried me the most. Finally, she said with a serious but controlled tone that yes, she'd used the money. I asked her what she meant by that. I reminded her that money was for our plans, that we'd never talked about withdrawing it, and that it was all our savings. Mariana took a deep breath and told me it had been a complicated situation, that she didn't have another choice and had to use it. What did you do with the money? I asked her. I need you to tell me clearly. She avoided looking at me. She started clearing the plates from the table, even though they were already clean, as if she needed to keep her hands busy to avoid answering. She spoke to me with a soft, almost condescending tone. Things happen, babe, she said. That's what savings are for, right? For some emergency that appears out of nowhere. That answer made me feel a pressure in my chest. It wasn't just the sentence, it was the way she said it, as if what had happened was something minor almost every day. That doesn't answer my question, I told her. That money wasn't just yours. I should have been consulted. What happened to the money? She stayed silent, left the plates on the counter, and rested her hands there with her head tilted. Several seconds passed. The silence got heavy. Mariana, I insisted, where did the money go? Finally, she raised her head. Her eyes were red, but she wasn't crying. She looked at me for just a second and looked down again. I had to give it to Oscar. That name wasn't familiar to me. Right away, I repeated it mentally while trying to place it in some context. Oscar, I asked. Who's Oscar? She didn't answer right away. That silence confirmed what my mind was already starting to rebuild. Oscar, your ex-boyfriend. I said. Mariana nodded slowly. Yes, she replied. I'm sorry, it was a life or death situation. I felt something inside me break in that instant. It wasn't just anger, it was disbelief, disappointment, a feeling of betrayal hard to describe. I took a step back and ran my hand over my face. You gave all our savings to your ex-boyfriend? I asked. Are you listening to what you're saying? Duncan, please, she said. It's not how it sounds. Explain it to me then, I demanded. Because right now, it sounds exactly like you took the money we saved for a year and gave it to your ex without telling me anything. She started speaking faster, as if she wanted to let it all out at once before I interrupted her. Oscar lost a very large sum in bets, much more than he could pay. He owed money to dangerous people, people who don't play fair. He called me desperate, crying, saying they'd hurt him if he didn't pay. I looked at her without saying anything. I waited for her to finish. You know how Oscar is, she continued. He always had gambling problems. He started with sports betting, then casinos, then online platforms. He never knew how to stop. I did remember that. Mariana had told me about him once, although always superficially. I knew they'd ended badly, that the bets had been the trigger. He lost a house because of that, she said. Literally, his family tried to help him many times, but nobody could stop him. I left him because I couldn't keep watching how he destroyed himself. And even so, you decided to help him. Now, I said, with our money. I couldn't let him die, she replied. Duncan, he called me saying he didn't know what to do, that he was alone. I couldn't ignore him. I felt the anger starting to overflow. And I asked her, don't I matter? Our plans don't matter. The wedding, the house, everything I deprived myself of for a year didn't matter at that moment. Of course you matter, she said. This has nothing to do with you. It has everything to do with me. I raised my voice. I put in most of that money. I gave up things. I adjusted my life, and you decide to hand it over without telling me a single word. She started crying, not loudly, but with silent tears running down her face. I didn't have time to consult you, she said. It was urgent. There's always time for a call, I replied. There's always time to give notice. What there wasn't was intention. The argument escalated quickly. I paced back and forth in the apartment. She stayed still, as if accepting the yelling was part of the punishment. Do you know what hurts me the most? I told her that you used the old cell phone. You knew exactly how to do it. You knew where it was. You knew I trusted you. I didn't think it was so serious, she replied. I thought you'd understand. That made me lose my patience completely. Understand? I yelled. That you keep in touch with your ex? That you give him our money? That you decide alone about something that affects us both? She raised her voice for the first time. It wasn't an easy decision, she yelled. I'm suffering too. It doesn't seem like it, I replied. It seems like you made a decision and expected me to just accept it. There was a long silence. She wiped her tears with the back of her hand. I had to help him, she finally said. Despite everything, I still have feelings for him. We shared years of our life. I couldn't leave him alone when he was desperate. Those words were the final blow. Feelings, I asked, with a low but shaky voice. After all this time, you still have feelings for him? She didn't answer right away. She just nodded. It's not love, she rushed to say, but I do care about him. He spoke to me desperate, and I couldn't ignore him. I felt responsible, and I repeated, you didn't feel responsible to me? She had no answer. The fight ended there, not because it was resolved, but because there wasn't anything else to say at that moment. I was furious, confused, and deeply hurt. She was crying, repeating that she didn't know what to do, that she'd only acted on impulse. That night we slept in the same house, but not together. I stayed on the couch, staring at the ceiling, trying to process that the money, the plans, and the trust had disappeared in a single move. When dawn broke, I made an impulsive but necessary decision. I took my keys, my wallet, and left the apartment in silence. I needed air, I needed distance. I walked aimlessly for several minutes until I sat on a bench in a nearby square. The place was almost empty at that hour. Only some older people were walking, and a couple of vendors were starting to set up. I felt physically and mentally exhausted. The first thing I did was call a lawyer I'd met years ago through a friend's recommendation. We weren't close, but I kept his contact. I explained the situation to him briefly, the joint account, the money withdrawn without my consent, the use of the cell phone, and the destination of the funds. The lawyer listened to me calmly, without interrupting me. When I finished, there was a brief silence on the other end of the line. Look, he finally told me, if the account was in both names and she was listed as an authorized third party, she could legally make transactions without your approval. There isn't much to do there. What do you mean there isn't anything to do? I asked. It was money for a specific purpose. We never agreed to this. I understand, he replied, but from a legal standpoint, it's complicated. It doesn't look like bank fraud. I'm sorry. The call ended quickly. I kept staring at the phone, feeling how despair was starting to take over me. It wasn't just the money. It was the feeling of being completely defenseless. I got up and started walking around the square without a clear direction. I felt a knot in my stomach. My hands were shaking. I sat down again, this time on another bench, and rested my elbows on my knees. I was on the verge of crying, but the tears wouldn't come out. It was more of a constant pressure, as if the body didn't know how to react. That was when I heard a voice next to me. Good morning, excuse me, a man said. I don't want to sound nosy, but I heard part of your conversation. I think I know someone who could help you. I looked up surprised. In front of me was an older man in his 60s, well-dressed, with a calm posture. He didn't seem pushy or invasive. He just waited for my reaction. Excuse me, I said, I don't understand. The man smiled slightly and put his hand in his jacket pocket. He took out a card and handed it to me. He's my nephew, he said. He's a lawyer. He's young but very good. He's passionate about what he does, and believe me when I tell you he doesn't let go of a case easily. He goes to the very end. I took the card without really knowing what to say. Before I could ask any questions, the man nodded and turned around. That's it, he said as he walked away. Good day. He left without waiting for an answer. I kept looking at the card. It had a name, a phone number, and an email. I thought he probably just wanted to advertise his nephew. At that moment, anything seemed suspicious or useless to me. I put the card in my pocket and stayed seated for several more minutes, watching people go by. My head was spinning. I wasn't sure what to do or who to turn to. I felt like I'd exhausted my options. Finally, more out of curiosity than hope, I took out the card and dialed the number. He answered almost immediately. "Hello," a young voice replied. "Andre speaking." I introduced myself and briefly explained that an older man in a square had given me his contact. He didn't seem surprised. "Ah, it must have been my uncle," he said. "He usually does that." I took a deep breath and started telling him everything from the beginning. I explained the relationship, the joint account, the saved money, the transfer, and Mariana's confession. I also mentioned what the other lawyer had told me. Andres listened without interrupting me. Unlike the previous lawyer, he didn't seem rushed or distant. He asked specific questions when something wasn't clear. "So," he said when I finished, "the money was withdrawn without your explicit consent and used for a purpose completely unrelated to what you'd agreed on." "Exactly," I replied, "but they told me there isn't anything to do." There was a brief pause. Dear friend Andre finally said, "Don't worry. That lawyer either didn't want to work or is too misinformed. Here we're talking about a clear breach of trust." I felt something inside me activate again. "Breach of trust?" I asked. "That's right," he replied. "And depending on how the facts are presented and the evidence we have, it could even extend to a possible theft. It's not as simple as she was an authorized third party, and that's it. Context matters a lot." I sat up on the bench. "Do you really think there's something that can be done?" I asked. "Yes," he said without hesitation. "But I need to see you in person to review everything calmly. Bank statements, messages, prior agreements, everything." I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. "Before that," he continued, "I need to ask you something important. Do you have any way to contact the ex-boyfriend?" The question took me by surprise. "I think so," I replied. "I never talked to him directly, but I could try calling him." "Perfect," Andre said. "If you do, I want you to record the conversation. Don't confront him, don't accuse him, just let him talk. That call could be key." I looked at the phone in my hand, feeling a mix of nerves and expectation. "Agreed," I replied. "When you have that recording, call me," Andre said. "From there we'll see how to proceed." The call ended. I stayed seated in the square looking at the phone, aware that I was about to do something that could change everything. I called Mariana a few minutes after ending the conversation with Andre. At that moment, I couldn't explain where it came from, but something inside me activated. It wasn't calm nor coldness. It was a kind of control I'd never felt before. As if for the first time since it all started, I understood that I needed to act and not react. When Mariana answered, I took a deep breath and let out a voice that surprised even me. "Hey, Mariana," I said. "I went out to get some sun for a while." "Hey," she replied with an insecure tone. "Are you okay?" "Yes," I continued. "I was thinking about what happened last night, and I think I was too hard on you." There was a brief silence. "I love you like nobody else in the world," I kept saying. "I don't want us to end over this. You're the love of my life, and I don't want to lose you." On the other side of the line, I heard how her breathing changed. Then her voice started to break. "Thanks, babe," she said between sobs. "I'm very glad to hear that. Believe me, it was something I had to do. I didn't do it to hurt you." "I understand," I replied. "Truly. And while I was thinking maybe we could talk to Oscar, I suppose we could reach some agreement." She hesitated for a second, but then replied with more confidence. "Yes," she said. "In fact, he told me he'd pay it. That's why I'm telling you not to worry." "Then I won't worry," I answered. "But I like to talk to him man to man. I've also gone through difficult things. I think we could understand each other, really." She asked. "Yes," I said, "just to know how he plans to return the money and all that." "Relax, I won't be aggressive." "I know, babe," she replied. "I know you. You're not a bad guy. I'll send you his contact." "Thanks," I told her. "I'll be home in a while. I'll bring you your favorite food." She smiled on the other side of the phone. I could hear it in her voice. "I love you," she said. "Me too," I replied. I hung up and left the phone on the table of the coffee shop where I was sitting. For a few seconds, I kept staring into the void. I didn't feel guilty for what I'd just done. I felt clarity. Minutes later, Mariana sent me Oscar's contact. Before calling, I activated the call recording feature on the phone. My hands weren't shaking. On the contrary, everything in me was strangely firm. I dialed. The call took a couple of rings to be answered. "Yeah," a male voice replied. Hi, Oscar, I said calmly. Yeah, who's speaking? He asked with a dry tone. I'm Duncan, I replied. Mariana's boyfriend. There was a brief pause, then a laugh. Not a nervous or uncomfortable laugh. It was a mocking, open, exaggerated laugh. Ah, sure, the idiot said between laughs. Mariana's told me a lot about you. I clenched my teeth, but kept my voice steady. I'm just calling to know how you plan to pay the money, I said. Mariana told me you'd return it. Oscar laughed again, this time with more contempt. Pay you? He said, I'll never give you guys anything. I felt a blunt blow to the stomach, but I didn't interrupt him. Stupid Mariana believed that whole story like always, he continued. She's very easy to manipulate despite the years. And apparently you are too. I forced myself to breathe slowly. That money's already history. He kept saying, thanks to you guys, I'm going to win millions. This bet will be the good one. Oscar, I said, I just want to understand how. I don't care if you understand anything. He cut me off. I forbid you from calling me again. His tone changed. It wasn't mocking anymore. It was threatening. And don't even think about calling the cops or doing anything stupid. He continued. I know people who can wipe you off the map without anyone asking questions. I stayed silent. I let him talk. Go save a bit more, he added, because if I need a little more, I'll ask Mariana for it again, and she'll give it to me. She always does. There was a short, loaded silence. Don't mess with me, he concluded. It's not in your best interest. The call dropped. I kept looking at the phone screen for several seconds. The recording was still saved. I felt a mix of rage and something more dangerous, determination. I didn't return home. I headed straight to Andres' office that same afternoon. When I arrived, I briefly explained what happened and handed him the phone with the recording. Andres sat at his desk, put on some headphones, and listened to the whole call without interrupting me. As the recording progressed, his expression changed. It went from professional attention to a slight smile, then to absolute seriousness. When it ended, he took off the headphones and stared at me. I told you that call would be key, he said. Here are direct threats, extortion, and implicit admission of fraud. And Mariana? I asked. Your girlfriend's also involved, he replied. Not as an innocent victim, but as part of a clear breach of trust. Both committed serious mistakes. He leaned back in his chair and crossed his hands. This guy and your girlfriend don't know what's coming for them, he said calmly. And believe me, this is just beginning. After that afternoon, everything moved faster than I ever imagined. Andre didn't waste time. Early the next day, he'd already filed the formal complaint, attaching the full call recording, the bank statements, the bank transactions, and a detailed statement from me. I thought those kind of processes were always slow, bureaucratic, exhausting. It wasn't like that. The call changed everything. As Andre explained, it wasn't just an improper transfer. In that recording, Oscar admitted he didn't plan to return the money, made direct threats against my safety, and suggested he could get money through Mariana again. That made the case into something much more serious. 2 days later, Andre called me in the morning. There's something you should know, he told me. Oscar isn't unknown to the authorities. It turned out that upon investigating his details, criminal records appeared. Not one, several. An old case of armed robbery, another for home burglary, and a third for substance use in public. Nothing recent, but enough so the threats wouldn't be taken lightly. This explains his way of speaking, Andre said, and also why it's so important to act fast. He didn't ask me to go testify right away. On the contrary, he recommended I keep my distance and cut contact with Mariana. Following his advice, I blocked her everywhere, calls, messages, social networks. I didn't want explanations. I didn't want apologies. I needed to protect myself emotionally and also legally. That same night, I went to live at a close friend's house. I told him everything calmly. He didn't judge me or give me speeches. He just offered me a couch and silence. That was enough. Meanwhile, Andres kept moving forward. Days later, he informed me they'd also gone for Mariana. It wasn't a dramatic arrest, but it was a formal summons. She had to show up to testify. According to the lawyer, her version fell apart quickly. She admitted using the old cell phone, making the transfer without consulting me, and giving the money to Oscar, knowing she had no real guarantees of return. She tried to present herself as someone who acted out of fear and compassion. that didn't exempt her from responsibility. The problem, Andre explained to me, is that she didn't just violate a couple's agreement, she violated the legal trust of a joint account with specific purposes. That has consequences. The process advanced in a matter of weeks. Mariana was handed a considerable fine. Not only did she have to return the exact amount she'd withdrawn, but pay an additional penalty that exceeded what we'd originally saved. The judge considered it an aggravating factor that most of the money didn't come from her, and that there was deliberate deception. She'd have to pay it all. Oscar, for his part, wasn't so lucky. The recorded threats, added to his background, weighed heavily. He was sentenced to 2 years in prison for extortion and threats. There was no negotiation, there were no dramatic speeches, only consequences. When Andre gave me the news, I didn't feel joy, nor immediate relief. I felt something closer to exhaustion, as if my body just understood it could lower its guard. During that time, Mariana tried to contact me by all possible means. She used different numbers, emails, new accounts. She even asked mutual friends to talk to me for her. They all said the same thing, that she was sorry, that she didn't think everything would escalate like that she never wanted to lose me. I didn't answer. Her parents also looked for me. They were respectful, but insistent. They told me Mariana was destroyed, that she'd made a serious mistake, that she deserved compassion. Have mercy, her mother told me once. She loves you. I didn't argue. I didn't explain anything. I simply didn't answer. When the legal process ended, I went back to the apartment for the last time. I was accompanied by my friend. I didn't want to do it alone. I went in and felt that place no longer belonged to me. Every object had a memory I no longer wanted to carry. I took my personal things, clothes, documents, some old photos I forgot to throw away. I didn't leave anything that could give rise to more conversations. I closed the door and handed over the keys. Now I live with that friend. It's not an ideal situation, but it's calm. I'm rebuilding my routines little by little. The lost money hurts, but not as much as it would have hurt to keep living a lie. With time, I understood something I didn't want to accept before. Mariana didn't betray me in a single act. She did it in a series of conscious decisions. She chose not to consult me. She chose to lie to me. She chose to protect someone who'd already proven to be destructive, and I finally chose not to stay. I learned that love doesn't justify everything, that misdirected compassion can turn into harm, and that trusting doesn't mean to stop protecting yourself. Today, I don't feel resentment, nor nostalgia. I feel clarity. If I learned anything from all this, is that losing money hurts, but losing respect for yourself hurts a lot more. And that's a loss I'm no longer willing to accept anymore.